Hi guys, Garage RC here, back with another video. Today's video is going to be 5 tips for fixing your steering. Before we get into that, just going to mention some new things I'm going to be doing and what's coming up on the channel in later videos. So I'm going to be doing a lot of drifting in the next 3 or 4 videos, and as part of that I have received a delivery with some goodies. So I've been looking forward to this. I've just taken delivery of an atomic censored speed controller. This thing is just gorgeous. It's tiny and can't wait to get that fitted into one of my cars to give a more smoother throttle response. So I've got a censored motor to go with that. I think it's a 7000 kV motor. I haven't quite decided which car to put this in. So we've got a nice atomic censored motor, and that's let me tell you, 7500 kV. Yep, nice. That is gorgeous. Okay, and what else have we got? Program card to go with it. I've also got a FlySky receiver, a new one for my MB4, so that I can fit a flatter profile body like the Corvette body on one of my cars. And just after I'd ordered this, someone mentioned to me that you can actually now get a Das Micro AFDS3, AFHDS3 receiver that will work with the MB4, which is actually a very small receiver that takes the small micro GST plugs. That one will be even better, so I'll be installing that when that arrives. Also, the big thing which I'm really excited about is my speed checker, which has finally arrived. So guys, I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I now have a speed checker. I feel like I can actually stop having speed checker envy of other channels when they're testing the speed of their cars, and I can now demonstrate how fast these cars are with like a quantitative value. So I will be doing a video soon checking the kV of each motor, the speed of each motor, comparing how it differs with different batteries, comparing it for each car, censored compared to non-censored. That's a video that'll be coming up later, and it will relate to both drift and racing, so bear with me on that if you're waiting for a specific video on each, but I think that will be covered by one for all. Okay guys, so that's everything done in terms of housekeeping. So lots of drift videos coming up, new toys to play with. If you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe to the channel. Your subscriptions really do count. The channel has grown exceptionally over the last few months. I'd like to see it continue growing. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you're watching my videos regularly, please hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with the content. So tip number 1, mini Zs are very often a big culprit for this. So usually you'll find your car turns one way more than the other, or it spins out one way and not the other. We're talking about all-wheel drives here, but this does apply to rear-wheel drives as well. So if you look on this wheel here, I'm going to instantly move it around. You can see there's not a lot of give. Now can you see I'm actually holding the hub here where the pins are, because there's always a bit of play there. But so we've got no play there. We're just seeing whether the wheel's moving against the axle of the drive shaft against the hub, and there's not much play there for a mini Z. If we go to the other side, and you can see, oh look, it's wobbling around everywhere. So that is going to affect your steering. That's going to affect how your car handles. It's going to affect how your car drifts. So initially you may have, now these you can see have got I've got metal alloy wheel nuts at the front, and I've still got plastic ones at the back. And most of the times you get a car like this and the plastic nuts just aren't good enough. They don't hold the wheel secure enough. This one is, so I've left it on, and the wheel's sitting quite nicely and it's not wobbling. So if you've got that on all 4 wheels, you don't need to do anything. But more often the case, you don't. And no matter how much you tighten it, the wheel doesn't tighten up. So this is where the first fix comes into play. Often I'll use shims, which are small metal washers, to help close down the space that's stopping the wheel from being tight. Now, can you see on there is a little metal shim? And in this instance, I'll just take the wheel off. I haven't got a shim on the inside, it's just on the outside. And that's all it took. Putting a shim underneath there was enough to stop that wheel from wobbling. Let's get that back on. Now, where you need to place that shim, whether it goes on under the nut, or if it goes on the inside between the hub and the wheel, or even on the inside of the hub. Depends on why your wheel is wobbling. Okay, so we're gonna have a look at that now. Okay, so we've got a hub here and we're looking at the hub, and you can see that when you place a wheel onto the hub, there is a special notch on the hub. I'm going to take this out to show you. Okay, and this notch is what the all-wheel drive wheel sits on and connects to make sure that drive transmits through the wheel. Okay, now if when you put your wheel on, this is all tight and it sits tight against the hub, so I'm going to put that in there now and show you. Now this doesn't at the moment. I'm going to point to it and demonstrate. If you look closely at this now, you can see that the round shaft is there and then the square shaft starts. So if I place a wheel onto this, and tighten it up, I'm going to pretend I've tightened it up just for the sake of speed, you can see that that's moving backwards and forwards. It doesn't matter how tight I hold the wheel on the outside or how tight the nut is there, that's going to keep moving. And the reason for that is because there is play here. The wheel stops there no matter how tight the nut is pressed against the wheel. So the way to deal with this is either to put washers or shims over that bit. Now I'm going to use a big thick yellow shim here to demonstrate. This is actually a plastic bearing off an X-Mod, but it makes great for demonstration. It has to be able to fit over the wider part of the shaft. Now if I put the wheel on, okay, it's an extreme example, but you can see there'll be no play. Okay, but that might upset your offset. It might push the wheel too far out compared to your chassis. So in this case, for this little Mini Z here, if I did that on the inside of that wheel, I might find that it sticks out the side of the car. That'd be no good. It'd be too wide. So the other way to do it, and again, is to actually put some washers on the inside. Now I'm using 5x7 by 5x7.2s here, and these things. It's what I happen to have lying around, but you can use things that fit a bit more snug. But you can see those are quite loose on there, but they don't fall over the inner hub. But it's just enough so when the drive shaft goes in, he says, there we go, that you don't get that extra bit of the round shaft, so your wheel sits flush. When you tighten it, it will hold steady. Now this is where the next error usually comes in, where the wheel's been over tightened and then it won't turn properly. That will also cause your car to spin out left or right. So once you get this right, make sure that your wheel can spin freely after you've done it, and that it's not too tight. So shim it on the inside if you need to, shim it on the outside if you need to, if it's not going to affect your wheel offset too much. And then final one, now this often applies to wheels where the offset may be 0 or less. This is one I've machined myself to make it less than 0. So not less than 0, sorry, what I mean by that. 0 offset is what the wheel was originally, and I've reduced the plastic in a hub so that the offset goes beyond that. Okay, so here you can see when I put the wheel on that the rectangular shaft in the middle is actually protruding through. So the nut will only turn to there, and again you'll get slop on the wheel from the other side. So in this instance, this thick washer is very useful to demonstrate this. Now let's just get a nut. So if we screw this on now, you can see, okay, a little bit of play left, a little bit tighter. That's pretty secure now, and the wheel can spin freely. There we go, wheel is spinning freely. And that's going to minimize problems with your steering. Okay. So tip number 2. So this one relates to the steering mechanism itself. I'm going to grab my SZ for this one. So the steering mechanism, we're talking about the knuckles, the ball joints. So this is more on atomic cars than probably mini Zs, but it can happen on mini Zs too. Anywhere where the joints meet. So for the example, these rods here, where the bell meets the inner shaft there for movement. Anywhere where you get that, so lower arms, upper arms, do it without the servo horn on and see if that will move freely. Okay, if it's not moving freely and it's catching, that will affect your ability to turn left and right. It will also greatly affect your steering. And the classic symptom you see if something's catching in the steering that way is that when you're steering, your car doesn't seem to respond the way it should. So you'll turn left, that when you turn right it goes too far right, and that's usually because if there's a stiffness in the steering mechanism, the servo has to overcome that before it can move in the other direction. So you definitely want to make sure those move freely. Now I use a Dremel with a special ball joint attachment that I use to just trim the inside of these, and it could be the fact that your car's been running fine, then one day this starts to happen. It's just wear and tear, where your car took a knock and it's just managed to scuff the inside of the ball joint enough so that the steering mechanism isn't smooth. So that's one very straightforward thing to do, and you can easily test it just by taking your servo horn off and seeing how easily it moves. It should move so freely without any resistance at all. So obviously I've got the servo on attached now, but even I can tell with my servo on, if I feel any resistance while I'm moving the wheels, I know something needs adjusting. And it can be something as simple as, I had this on my GLA as well, where you've got the screw that raises the ride height and it's catching on the hub as the hub turns in, and the hub has to ride over it. Arm of the, sorry, not the hub, the knuckle. The arm of the knuckle has to ride over that screw, which is this screw down here, and causes the arm to catch. Again, with these joints as well, every single joint, make sure that it's tight, but not so tight that it's not moving freely. Okay. One other thing worth mentioning is that there's a little ball screw that goes into the servo horn there. If that's loose, you'll get wobble in your steering. Now if you look on here, I've got barely any wobble on the steering. It's pretty good, and I have to say my SZ is particularly tight for this, and the steering mechanism on this is amazing, especially for drifting. You can get a lot of steering angle and makes this quite a good drifter. Okay, so that was tip number 2. Tip number 3 is similar to tip number 2, but relates more to the suspension. So what we're talking about is how tight or how loose the suspension is on each side. So for an extreme example, if you had a very hard spring on one side and a soft one on the other, that would affect your ability to turn left and right. It would definitely make a difference. So on mini Zs, it's a little bit easier to ensure that your springs are the same and your settings are the same. On these cars, you can change the spring settings by adjusting the rotation of these shocks. The collars can be adjusted and it changes the tension in the shocks. So I know with the mini Z you've got the double wishbone suspension on the rear on those, and you can definitely do a similar thing with those as well. Yes, so the suspension, again, make sure it's smooth on both sides. So check the arms aren't sticking vertically, check your tension is the same each side, and that will affect, and that can apply to the rear as well. If you've got one wheel where the suspension is stiffer than the other side, that will affect the direction which your car turns more easily or not so, or if it spins out or if it slides evenly. So tip number 3, check your suspension settings, make sure they are correct. Okay guys, so tip number 4. Tip number 4 relates to drive shafts and diffs. Okay, so we're talking about steering angle, and this one particularly I can relate back to my Bz3. I was having issues that if I turned hard left or right, the car would spin almost like it done a handbrake turn. And what I found was that the drive shafts that I was using had a limited angle, and when the angle went too far, the wheel would lock. What that means is the drive shaft wouldn't allow the wheel to turn. So here's a regular drive shaft. Now I'm going to try and put a picture up so you can see the difference between these and how I fixed this problem. I got some of these Aurora Racing from PPM Racing crooked angle drive shafts. What that means is they can operate. I'm going to try and see if I can show you like this, but if not, I'll put a picture up. you can get more angle from the I can't do it like that. I'll put a photo up. It enables you to turn more before it locks, so it is able to give you greater steering range while the wheels still turn freely. So these are angled crooked drive shafts. Okay, now the other good thing about these, which does actually relate back to the first point, is they've got quite a long screw thread at the end, allowing for more offset wheels, and also allows you to adjust with shims more easily. So that's tip number 4. I'm going to mention diffs briefly because I've not had much issue with differentials causing problems with steering left and right. Definitely not on my all-wheel drive cars anyway. I think some of you guys out there with rear-wheel drive Mini Zs, you might find that issue because of the way the rear axle is designed. But on all-wheel drives, if your diff is working, you shouldn't have any issue. The only thing I can see, and I've had this before, is if you've got, like, for example, a slight uneven build where one side is just fractionally different to the other, you might find that the drive shaft might need some shims in to help it sit in the cup properly so it doesn't jam. What I mean by that is, just like we put the shims this side of the hub to help get the right amount of drive shaft through the other side, you want the dog bone to sit in the cup correctly. If it's too far out, it can pop out or it can jam, and that'll break your drive shaft. Whereas if you shim it so it sits a bit more tightly in, it's less likely to pop out or less likely to jam. So that relates a little bit to part 1, but on the whole, it's about the drive shafts and getting the drive shafts with the maximum angle for the car you're driving. If not, turn down the endpoints on your transmitter. That's the other way around that, so your wheels aren't going to lock. In terms of differentials, like I said, not really an issue I've had in terms of steering problems. As long as the diff is smooth, it should be fine. Unless, of course, you've got a lock diff, in which case then your steering issues might relate more to the fact that something isn't level either side. Maybe your wheel offsets aren't quite matched up. Things like that can then cause a car to turn one way more than the other. So tip 5 is more of, it's a little bit of a cop-out, transmitter. Okay, so if you're running a good transmitter which has got adjustable endpoints, it enables you to get more range of steering. And certainly on the cars like the Mini Z, I found that it really makes a big difference having the ability to adjust the endpoints and your neutral point, and it can just give you the maximum range. And I found using just a regular Mini Z Sports with the kyosho Synchro Touch, I was able to get more steering range left to right and make it more even. That's one of the things where, you know, it's more of a bigger investment, but it is worthwhile and definitely helps with all the other cars. The Atomic cars, definitely my MB4, really helps you fine tune that steering. All these things are really important when it comes to drifting your car. I mean, I know it's important in racing, but if you want to get a maximum steering angle, these are the parts that are going to get under stress. You know, the drive shafts, the servos. So you want to make sure all those parts run smoothly. Alright guys, I hope those tips were useful today. I've tried to keep it as simple as possible, but you can see there are so many different things you can do which are pretty simple, which will improve the steering of your car, enable you to get a better steering range, enable you to be able to turn left and right equally, be able to do those nice drifts when you're drifting. So guys, that's all for today. If you like the video today, please leave me a sub, like the video, hit the like button, hit your notifications. Every sub counts. I'm getting so many views, really appreciative of that. Thanks guys, you're supporting the channel. If you watch my videos and you're not a subscriber, please hit that sub button, and I'll see you all guys next time.